Mr. Mpoma, before the lunch break, I was about to take you to page 28 of your second affidavit at bundle 3, where you deal with Mr. Mhlangu's affidavit. You'll remember that your second affidavit effectively was in answer to 2 affidavits that you were provided, and the sum total of what you say there is that you stand by your version in relation to your discussion with Mr. Mhlangu. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Have you had an opportunity of reading what he, or presumably you did, had an opportunity of reading what he said?
Yes, I did.
Perhaps we could just go to that very briefly. Could you go to bundle 1? And turn up page 169.
Yes, I'm there.
And perhaps then you can move to page 172.
Yes, I'm there.
Much of what Mr. Mhlangu has to say on page 172 appears to be summarized in paragraph 17 at 173. It's now not clear to me whether he denies having a telephonic discussion with you or he simply denies your recollection of what he said. But he says, I submit that the support that Mpoma gave to NMR, that's the attorney's firm, the intersection between one of our social circles, the nature of my social interactions with him forbade me from being rude to him or putting any pressure on him. This would have resulted in a backlash in an important friendship circle and would have adversely affected my standing as an attorney amongst the community of lawyers in that social circle. I care about my reputation and standing amongst my friends and peers. Do you have any comment in that regard?
Well, I don't have a comment. The discussion was between the two of us. Of course, I informed Mr. Mkonas about it later on, and I never shared it with anybody else except when the commission approached me.
Then he says, I had no motive or reason to pressure or call Mpoma about the pace or details of the settlement between Gama and Transnet.
He did call me.
Just 1 second. Did you say earlier on he called you about 2 times?
Yes, I recall that he called me 2 times.
Yes. I think when you gave evidence in the morning, if I'm not mistaken, there may have been a time, and I don't know whether it referred to the first call, there may have been a time when you seemed to suggest that he was not pressurizing you. Is that correct?
That is correct. It was on the second time that he was...
It was only during the second call that he was pressurizing you?
Yes.
But the first call, he was like making inquiries?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
Then at paragraph 19 he said, lastly, if I had any questions, which I did not, I would have raised these with Mkonazi. To the best of my recollection, Mpoma was a few levels down in the Transnet executive management hierarchy. Any comment on that?
Yes, it's quite correct, because I reported to Mr. Stephen, who was an EXCO member. So in the normal scheme of things, if he was calling on behalf of the minister, he would have called the CEO or the chairman of the board, not me.
Yeah. But did he call you?
Yes, he called me.
Then he goes on to say at 20, I never said to Mpoma, as he alleges, number 1, wanted to get it done quickly. And essentially what he says in that paragraph is that that's not the language that he uses. He doesn't refer to a sitting president as number 1. He would have referred to him as President Zuma. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I stand by what I said in my own affidavit.
Are you quite clear about this conversation?
I'm quite clear, Chair.
Yes. Okay.
The conversation was not a long one.
It was not a long one.
I was driving home.
Because that was the second one.
Yes.
Yes.
And I decided to say what I said to him so that it stops.
Yes. Okay.
Can I then take you, please, to your third and last affidavit, bundle 3, page 29.
Yes, I'm there.
You deal in this affidavit with two things. Under main headings, new documents at page 29, and then the payment of legal fees at the foot of page 30. You see that?
Yes.
And under new documents, you deal with annexes SM1, 2, and 3.
Yes, I do.
Perhaps I can take you then directly to those annexes. Can we start, please, with SM1, that you find at page 33.
Yes, I'm there.
This is a consultation note. It reflects you as having been present. Have you had an opportunity of reading this note?
Yes, I did.
Does it accord with your recollection of what transpired at this meeting?
Yes, it does.
So you will see there listed as present was yourself, Mr. Mkhonazi, Mr. Langa, we know by now is the attorney, Mr. Gama, Mr. Gula, and Sangoni. They were attorneys from Doris.
Yes.
And then in the second paragraph it says, Tembalanga and Ibogana Gama were also in attendance, but we initially had a caucus meeting between Sabu, Mr. Mpoma, Mr. Mkhonazi, and myself. This is a note of a caucus meeting.
Yes.
Could you just read paragraph 4 of that note into the record?
The paragraph reads, Mr. Mkhonazi explained that he would like to assist Mr. Gama where reasonably possible. His intention is to bring him back into his, in brackets, the chairman's, close bracket, office. He wants Mr. Gama to assist him on a number of strategic issues. He, however, needs a good motivation to do so. His view is that if he is provided with an opinion stating that there had been some unfairness towards Mr. Gama at the board meeting on 16 February, he will persuade the other board members to make the decision to bring Mr. Gama back into the organization. That's where it stops.
So you were aware that there was an upcoming board meeting on the 16th of February.
Yes.
And he said that if he's provided with an opinion setting out that there has been some unfairness towards Mr. Gama, then he would persuade the other board members to make a decision to bring Mr. Gama back into the organization.
Yes, that's what it says.
At the meeting of the 16th.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Mpoma, just want to share with you the impression I get from that paragraph, particularly the sentence that Mr. Maibek just referred to. And you can tell me whether that's the impression that you may have got being at the meeting when this was said by Mr. Mkhonazi. Maybe I'm being unfair to him, but it gives me the impression of somebody who is saying, I just need somebody to say in an opinion, there was some unfairness.
Yes, sir.
In the dismissal of this man. Then if I've got that, then that will give me grounds to go to the board and I'll get the board to agree to take him back. Is that impression, does it accord with your own impression of what you may have got when you had this?
Yes, sir, it does.
It does?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Then if you go over the page to paragraph 5, it says he, this being Mr. Makwenazi, was to discuss details of such return to Transnet with Mr. Gama in a one-on-one meeting to be held between them. You recall that?
Yes, I recall.
And then it seems that he wasn't familiar with the details. There are details, however, that he is unfamiliar with, such as when was Mr. Gama fired, when Mr. Gama was suspended and the like.
Yes,
Is that correct?
that is correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mapoma. That surprises me. How could Mr. Mkhwanazi not be aware of when Mr. Gama was fired at that stage of the discussions about the Gama matter? That just seems strange to me. I would have thought that before that he would have familiarized himself properly with at least basic facts, like when was this man dismissed? Had he not prior to that, because you were at the meeting and he had been talking to you, had he not been furnished with any memo or document that set out the important background?
Not by me, Chair.
Not by you.
Not by me. If he had any knowledge of the details of the suspension, the disciplinary hearing, and anything else, it would not have come from me.
Oh, okay, so to your knowledge, as at this time, in your conversation with him, you had not, he had not asked you to brief him about these facts?
No, but I did also would have expected him at the time to have that kind of information. Yes.
Just that it seems strange to me, you know. He already wanted to meet with Mr. Gama on a one-on-one meeting to discuss, I think he was already wanting to discuss a possible settlement.
Yes, that's what you wanted to discuss, Chair.
Yes. And I'm not sure how you discuss a possible settlement of an unfair dismissal if you don't know when the person was dismissed. Because that's like one of the first things you look at, because you are going to, you may have to apply your mind to, will this man or will this person want back pay? If he wants back pay or she wants back pay, for how long could they be demanding back pay? You know, that kind of thing. But I guess you can't assist.
I can assist.
Yes. Okay, no, that's fine. Mr. Mybeck.
Thank you. Perhaps if you can just have a look at paragraph 6. It does record, once he is clear on those details, he can then formulate a proposal. Was that said?
Yes.
And then I'm not going to take you to the balance of this note, but I just ask you to confirm that at paragraph 16 at page 35, the note ends on this basis. At that point, the caucus ended so that Mr. Mkhwanazi could meet alone with Mr. Gama.
Yes.
And is that what happened?
Yes, that happened.
Were you surprised by his decision or wish to exclude you from, and anybody, including the Transnet attorneys, from this meeting he wanted to have with Mr. Gama?
He could exclude me because of my position in the company. Mr. Gama was an executive.
Yes.
So decisions of that nature with him would have been taken at a particular level.
Yes.
Not mine. But with the attorneys who were representing Transnet, he would have taken them
Yes.
to the discussions.
Yes.
Because they were there on Transnet's behalf.
Yes.
And he was perfectly entitled to take them along in my absence. But with me, I was not surprised that I was not part of that discussion.
The exclusion of the attorneys, did that surprise you?
It did at the time.
Yes.
But well, at least from my understanding was that they still had to talk about the details of the settlement, which we knew nothing about. I certainly knew nothing about. So I was not going to be able to add any value to what they were going to talk about.
Yes.
Because I did not know what the mandate Mr.
Yes.
Mkonas had in terms of the details of the settlement he had to negotiate with Mr. Gama.
Yes.
Because he never shared that with me.
Yes. Had you been involved in a number of settlement negotiations in regard to legal disputes relating to Transnet and other parties at all, or
No,
was
not
that not your role?
Sorry, my apologies again. Not a Transnet, because there was a unit that dealt with such matters as Transnet.
Yes.
It was
Okay.
not my role.
Okay. No, it just strikes me as strange. Well, you have provided a reason why you say you are not surprised by your own exclusion, but then one would have thought that Transnet attorneys would have been allowed to be part of that meeting, because otherwise, why were they there? You know, did he not need them to be part of the negotiations, or did he not need to get advice from them as the discussions happened?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Mybeck.
Thank you. Then if we go to page 36, on the face of it, this is an email from you on the 14th of February to Messrs. Goulet and Sangoni.
Yes.
And you say, Sabu, the chair's asked that we prepare a two-pager for him for the board meeting. What board meeting was that?
This was the upcoming board meeting referred to in the consultation note, 16 February.
16 Feb. I've started the process. Please look at the attachment and finalize stroke settle.
Yes.
What was this? Was this the favorable opinion that Mr. Makonazi was looking for?
This was the start of the process of what Mr. Mkonas was asking us to do. Because he wanted something that he could take to the board and table it there.
Yeah.
And he wanted some memorandum of some sort, setting out perhaps the history of the matter, what he has considered, and the proposal that he was going to make to the board.
As he had described at the consultation on the 22nd of January.
Yes.
And then pages 37 and 38, is that then your work?
That's my memo that I drafted.
Deal with a few things. Under the heading settlement negotiations, at the foot of page 37,
Yes, and then
please would you read that into the record?
paragraph 7 reads, the current Transnet board commenced its duties on 13 December 2010. The chairman of the board, with the support of the shareholder minister, has within his rights and obligations decided to revisit the matter of the disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Gama. This decision was informed by a number of reasons stated here under.
We're going to come to that. This sentence, the chairperson of the board with the support...
Please raise your voice, Mr. Mybeck.
I beg your pardon,
It's gone
I'm
down
reading
again.
at the same time. Thank you, chairperson. This sentence, the second sentence, the chairman of the board with the support of the shareholder minister has within his rights and obligations decided to revisit the matter.
Yes.
How did that sentence come to be put into this memorandum?
Mr. Mafire had informed me about that.
Just repeat that answer.
Mr. Mafire had informed me about that.
Did he tell you?
That what he was doing, the reinstatement, he had the support of the minister.
Yes. Okay. So in preparing the memorandum, you included that?
Yes, I included it.
Because he had told you about it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Then,
And you are sure about this?
I'm sure about that.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Mybeck?
yes, thank you. And then what you do is you seem to set out a series of factors in support of some sort of settlement.
Yes.
And I want to paraphrase because there's a point I'm going to come to. You talk about the public protector complaint at 8, At 9, you deal with something that's generic really to all litigation, where you say risk is always part of litigation. At 10, another generic thing, the judicial processes are extremely slow. At 11, you deal with various acting appointments. 12, you say these are not conducive to effective and operational environment. 13, you again talk about acting appointments in the context of corporate governance. 14, you say that Mr. Gama is highly experienced. And 15, another generic thing about legal costs. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
But what you don't deal with here is anything about prospects of success in the litigation against Mr. Gama.
Yes, I don't.
You accept that a lot of the points you make you can say about any litigation.
Yes.
Time, cost, inconvenience of litigation.
Yes.
Why do you not deal with prospects of success?
I did not deal with those because one, I had not been involved in that process. I was not privy to the details thereof, the disciplinary hearing, and I could not form any opinion on Transnet's prospects of success on that at the time. So I simply said nothing about it, despite the request by Mr. Mkwanas that we should have an opinion regarding that for him to take to the board.
Are you saying that Mr. Mkwanas' request to you, which resulted in you preparing this memorandum, had included that you had to deal with the prospects of success, but you did not deal with them because you didn't have the information?
It included that, and he had wanted us to...
Say it did include that?
Yes, he had wanted us to have something that will show that there was an unfairness towards Mr. Gama.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and one of the things that one will consider on the prospects of success will be such unfairness.
Yes, yes.
And I could not make that call at the time.
Yes.
Absolutely I could not. So I wrote nothing on that aspect.
Yes.
Yes, I think you make an important point. Perhaps I put it incorrectly. It's not that you didn't deal with prospects of success as much as you didn't deal with Mr. Gama's dismissal having been unfair.
Yes.
All right. Now, let's get to SM3 over the page. At 39.
Before that, had you, before preparing this memorandum, had you had a chance to read the ruling or judgment in quotes of the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry that resulted in Mr. Gama's dismissal?
No.
You had not?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, Mr. Maibe.
At page 39, what you see is that the next day, the 15th of February, this memorandum is sent back to you by Mr. Sangoni from the Nasrates.
Yes.
And it says, please find here with the document which Mr. Mpoma sent to us yesterday with our amendments.
Yes.
Now, your draft included...
With our amendments, I think.
Yes, I'll point them out now.
I thought you read with our memo where it says with our amendments. Maybe I didn't hear you correctly.
Yes. Please find here with the document which Mr. Mpoma sent us yesterday with our amendments. I'll point out the amendments.
Oh, okay, okay.
Your memo included 16 paragraphs. You see that at page 38?
Yes.
The
1-5, or 16,
16.
Yeah.
You see that the memo that the Nasrates sent back to you had 18.
Yes.
All of your points, and they added 2 paragraphs.
Yes.
The new paragraphs are 10 and 11.
Yes.
You confirm that?
I confirm.
The rest of it is all your work.
Yes.
I mean, so for example, paragraph 7, that said that, what you had said, the chairperson of the board, with this support of the shareholder minister, has within his rights and obligations decided to revisit the matter. That remained unaltered.
Yes.
new paragraphs 10 and 11. Well, let me read to you 10. And this is really text about prospects of success.
Yes.
10, in the arbitration before the Bargaining Council, Mr. Garma has challenged the appropriateness of the sanction of dismissal. You hadn't dealt with this.
No.
The issue of sanction is very complex and perplex matter to which there is no clear and straightforward answer. This is demonstrated by, amongst other cases, the celebrated case of Sedumo versus Rustenburg Platinum Mines, in which the Labour Courts and the Constitutional Court on the one hand and the Supreme Court of Appeals on the other hand came to different conclusions on sanction. The other cases dealing with the issue of sanction, which also demonstrate the complexity of consideration of appropriate sanction, are the Shoprite Checkers cases, and then they add these footnotes.
Yes.
In which the facts in the two separate cases were similar, but the Labour Appeal Court in each of the cases came to a different conclusion on sanction. Just by the way, Chairperson, one of those judgments was yours.
Yes.
Pilfering at Shoprite Checkers, long time ago.
Yes, I remember that.
And then it goes on to say, in the one case, the finding of the Labour Appeal Court was endorsed by the Supreme Court of Appeal. That's what they give some advice on sanction.
Yes, I see that.
They insert it. And then paragraph 11, it is accordingly our view that there is a probability that the Bargaining Council or a court, considering the appropriateness of the sanction or dismissal of Mr. Garma, may reach the conclusion that dismissal was not appropriate having regard to the challenge on sanction advanced by him. In that instance, the court may either award compensation to Mr. Garma or find that a lesser sanction ought to have been imposed and therefore order his reinstatement.
Yes, I see that.
So the high watermark of that is that there was a probability that the Bargaining Council may reach a different conclusion.
Yes.
Now, did you receive this memorandum?
I received the memorandum.
And what did you do with it?
I forwarded it to Mr. Mafika's office.
And
Mr.
what
Mkwanazi's office.
Mr. Mkwanazi.
Yes, Mr. Mkwanazi,
Yes.
sorry.
And what was your expectation as to what he would have done with it?
What he would have done with it, would he have taken the document and used his own letterhead for him to present it to the board? That is what I was expecting him to do, because this was a memorandum for him to table to the board and for him to discuss it there. But we did not discuss that memorandum. I just forwarded it.
I guess you did note the new paragraphs.
Yes, I did note them.
Yes. When you sent it to Mr. Mkwanazi, did you send it to him as your memorandum, or was there something that told him that there was an input from the attorneys, Transnet attorneys?
As much as I would not know the detail of what I would have written maybe on the email or something like that, or what I would have said to him when I gave it to him personally, he will know that it was settled by the attorneys.
Or he knew that it had been settled by the attorneys? Yes. Okay. What you don't remember is whether you did say to him, paragraph 10 and 11 have been inserted by our attorneys.
I would not have said that.
Yeah, you would not have said that.
No, that's not. That's not how I would have done it.
Okay,
I would have simply given him the memo to say, here's the memo you requested, and I would have left it there. Unless he had specific questions that he wanted me to answer, then I would have answered them at the time.
You see, the importance of that answer you give me is that if you didn't indicate to him that there were these paragraphs that came from the attorneys, he would be entitled, would he not, to accept this memorandum as what you were saying to him as something he could put before the board?
Not in the context of our discussion.
Sorry?
Not in the context of the discussions that he and I had with the attorneys.
Yes, what was that discussion?
At all times, he knew that the attorneys were involved in the memorandum. They were going to assist Republican in drafting the memorandum. So he knew exactly what was going on. He asked me when I was with the attorneys. Yes. Yes. Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've spoken without being recorded. Let me just try and capture that again. Was his request directed to both you and the Transnet attorneys?
Yes, sir.
To prepare a two-pager for him?
Yes.
Okay. So therefore, when he received the document, he would have known that probably was the product of a joint effort.
Yes, sir.
Including yourself and the attorneys.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I'm concerned about this situation, that from your side, you didn't know anything on the matter on the basis of which you could say that there were probably good prospects of success or bad prospects of success. You have told me you knew nothing that could enable you to form that opinion.
Yes.
Then the attorneys now insert this document, insert these paragraphs, which include a paragraph which seems to just suggest that in the view of the author or authors of this memorandum, there was a probability that the bargaining council could or may or might find the sanction of dismissal inappropriate. Now, I'm concerned whether you didn't effectively adopt that approach, even though you might not have known whether it was justified.
So when you read the document now,
Yeah.
sitting here
Yeah.
as a third party
Yes.
to it,
Yes.
this is the impression that you will have gained, you can
Yes.
gain, and that is understandable.
Yes.
But at the time, this document was going to Mr. Mkonazi,
Yeah.
and fortunately, when the attorneys sent it back, they also copied Ms. Stephen on it,
Yes.
so that she also is aware that
Yeah.
it was settled by them.
Yes.
Yes, it appears under my name here, but the only person to whom it was intended at the time was Mr. Mkonazi,
Yes.
who knew exactly the context under which it was produced.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe another possible point in your defense is that Transnet attorneys, having been involved in the matter, if they put in a paragraph that says there were prospects of success or there was a probability that the bargaining council may find the sanction inappropriate, you might have deferred to them on the basis that they would know the merits of the case better than you.
I can agree, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Mr.
Thank you.
Mybeck.
Mr. Mpuma, I'm going to take you in a moment to some statements that you made at a meeting about your views of the fairness or otherwise of Mr. Gama's dismissal. Are you sure you're not being coy here? Did you have a view that it was fair? Did you have a view that it was unfair? Or did you have no view?
Well, I had a view.
So what was your view?
My view was that I saw nothing wrong that had happened at the disciplinary hearing.
I beg your pardon?
I knew nothing wrong that had happened at the disciplinary hearing. So there was no reason for me to say it was not fair. I absolutely had no reason to say so. Because there was a decision.
I'm
That's
sorry,
the chair,
to this
the chair.
side.
Oh, my apologies.
I don't hear, yeah.
There was a decision of Antropas SC, which Mr. Gama was only challenging the part thereof. The merits of the matter, that is the merits of the dismissal, he was not challenging. He was simply challenging the dismissal. So
The sanction.
the sanction rather. So I don't know how I could have been asked for a view on its merits when the person affected saw fit not to challenge it himself. So I absolutely did not understand all this effort being made, at the time to reinstate, ask for pay fees and all these things. So my view was that the finding is there, must be acted upon. So this was my view.
So did you think, were you of the view that the dismissal of Mr. Gama was fair or unfair?
I said I had no reason to say it was unfair.
Ah.
It was there, it was not challenged on its merits.
I'm not sure if you are on the same page as Mr. Mybeck. When it is said that a dismissal is fair or unfair, there are at least two possibilities. The one, I'm talking about a dismissal for misconduct such as this one. The one reason why it may be said it was unfair is because it is thought that he should not have been found guilty. You understand that?
I understand that.
So somebody who looks at what he was charged with, looks at the evidence, looks at the reasoning of the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry, or in regard to his finding that Mr. Gama was guilty, might say, I don't agree with the conclusion of the chairperson of the hearing that Mr. Gama was guilty. Okay, so therefore, the dismissal is unfair because he was not guilty, as far as I'm concerned. He was wrongly found guilty. But another possibility is that somebody might say, I agree with the conclusion of the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry that Mr. Gama was guilty. But I don't agree that the sanction of dismissal was appropriate, was fair. I think that he should have been given a final written warning or something less than dismissal. But in both cases, you talk about whether a dismissal is fair or unfair. Okay. Now we know that in the bargaining council, Mr. Gama was accepting that he was guilty of these acts of misconduct of which he had been found guilty. He was only challenging the fairness of the sanction. Okay? So when counsel asks you whether you had a view whether the dismissal of Mr. Gama was fair or unfair, he is talking broadly. You might say, I thought it was unfair because he should not have been found guilty. You might say, I had no problem with the finding that he was guilty, but I didn't think that dismissal was fair, was appropriate. Or you might have some other ground of saying the dismissal was unfair. Okay, I thought I must clarify that.
No, thank you, sir, for that.
Now, what is your answer to the question then? Did you have a view whether Mr. Gama's dismissal was fair or unfair, or did you not have a view?
I don't think I had a view at the time.
You did not have a view?
No.
Okay,
I see. Well, we'll come to that. Let me just go back a little. You made mention of the fact that Mr. Mkhwanazi wanted you to prepare the memorandum together with the lawyers.
Yes.
Could you just go back, please, to page 36 of Bundle 3? And I just ask you to confirm that what you said to Mr. Sangoni was the chairs asked that we prepare two-pager. Who are you referring to there?
I'm referring to myself and the attorneys.
Now, we've dealt with the new paragraphs 10 and 11 that were added by Denise Rates. I'd like to take you, please, to Bundle 2. That memorandum that we've dealt with now was produced the day before the board meeting, correct? You could go to Bundle 2 and turn to page 19. Now, on the face of it, this is a report for Transnet on settlement from Mr. Gule of Denise Rates, dated the 22nd of February, and you see at the top it was CC'd to you.
Yes, I see that.
Did you receive this document?
I will have received it.
So this, whereas your memo was finalized or settled the day before the board meeting, this report is actually produced on the same day as Mkhwanazi signs the settlement agreement and the day before Mr. Gama signs.
I see that.
That's right. Now, I want to just take you, please, to page 20. And can I direct your attention to paragraph 1.1?
Yes.
There, Denise Rates say, there are various opinions which have been obtained from reputable firms of attorneys with regard to prospects of success of Mr. Gama in successfully challenging his dismissal by the company. All of the opinions, including ours, which we gave after perusing documents pertaining to the disciplinary inquiry, were of the view that Mr. Gama's chances of successfully challenging his dismissal are not good.
I see that.
These are the people that you settling and writing your memorandum with.
Yes.
So their view here in this report is prospects of success are not good.
Yeah.
Had you seen that opinion?
The one that they wrote.
Well, they're talking about all the opinions, including ours.
I'm not sure I did. I'm not sure I did.
Well, had you seen other opinions?
I'm not sure. Remember, Mr. Gama's disciplinary and opinions and stuff, I would have come into the matter very, very late. After the bargaining council, after Mr. Mkhwanazi came in,
Yeah.
there would have been opinions probably that were written for one or other body or board or EXCO and so on, that would have missed me. But if they were sent to me, I would have read them. I don't deny that they were sent to me. They would have been sent to me, I would have read them, but I don't recall which one is this one, which one is that one.
Did you ever see an opinion from Mr. Todd of Bowman's?
I would have seen it if it's sent to me, although I don't
No, I'm
recall
not
it off my
asking
head.
you that. That doesn't help
I don't
anyone.
recall it off my head, Mr.
Mr. Mpoma, you occupied a senior legal position in the company.
Yes,
You were being asked at one point in time to produce a memorandum dealing with the fairness or unfairness of Mr. Gama's dismissal.
yes.
You didn't bother to look around and see if there were legal opinions.
I had attorneys that were working with me.
I'm asking you. You didn't look around for legal opinions.
No, I did not at the time.
I see. So,
Well, if you didn't look around for legal opinions, at least one would have expected you to call for the ruling of the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry, because you would know that if you went to that ruling, that you ought to find the reasons that the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry advanced for why he found Mr. Gama guilty of the charges that had been preferred against him and why he recommended that Mr. Gama should be dismissed. One would have thought that you would be interested at least to read those. Well, there were two rulings actually. One on whether Mr. Gama was guilty of the charges, and the other one whether or what sanction would be fair, would be appropriate.
Yes.
One would have expected you that you would have been interested, particularly after the chairperson, Mr. Mkhwanazi, mentioned that he wanted the memo to address the issue of whether there was unfairness. You didn't try and access those rulings.
No.
You didn't. No. But you accept that that's what would have been expected from you.
Yes, I accept that.
Yes.
Chair, there's a decision, as communicated to me, had been taken already to reinstate Mr. Gama. So whatever opinion or whatever was said, if the decision had been taken already, it was taken. My opinion or analysis of what the opinions say or said, I don't think that it would have changed much, because there were, at that stage, negotiations for settlement already ongoing between Mr. Mkhwanazi and Mr. Gama. So, past opinions about the fairness or unfairness, the rightness or wrongness of whatever had happened in the past, I don't think would have amounted to much. And I might have had that view at the time, hence I did not, to use the council's word, bother myself to be looking for opinions on whether the treatment of Gama was fair or not, because they were already banned from doing this thing.
Well, you see, if Mr. Mkhwanazi had not asked that the two-pager should include, the two-pager that should be prepared for him should include the question of whether there was unfairness, I would understand your answer, you know. I would understand your answer. But once he specifically requests that that be addressed, I would expect that if you had not read that ruling, and if you did not have a view on the fairness or otherwise of Mr. Gama's dismissal, I would expect that you would want to read that. But irrespective of whether the board would change its view or not, simply because Mr. Mkhwanazi requested that the two-pager should include something on that. That's what makes me think that I would have expected that you would at least want to read that, and in order to be able to address this issue that he requested be addressed.
Yeah, I understand.
You accept that.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yes, yes.
But at the time,
yeah.
I was working with the attorneys,
yes,
and the instruction was given to us,
yes,
as a team,
yes,
I used the word wrongly, and we produced the two pages that he was looking for.
Yes, okay. Mr. Maybeck.
Thank you. So that's paragraph 1.1 at page 20. All the opinions say prospects of challenging his dismissal are not good.
Yes.
Prospects of success. If you go to page 21, under the heading sanction, you will see that's precisely the same paragraph that Denise Wright inserted as paragraph 10 into your memo, with the footnotes.
Yes, I see that.
And then, if you go to page 22, you will see that Denise Wright conclude in precisely the same terms as the inserted paragraph 11 into your memo.
Yes, I see.
Where they say there's a probability that the sanction may be found unfair.
Yes, I see that.
So did you read this opinion when you received it?
Yes, I read it.
Were you able to reconcile paragraph 1.1 with paragraph 4?
You can't reconcile them.
You can't. What view did you form then when you read this report? I mean, what's going on here?
It contradicts itself.
It's what?
It contradicts itself.
It contradicts itself.
Yeah.
I guess Mr. Mayberg is asking whether you did anything about this contradiction.
I don't think I did anything.
You didn't do anything.
No.
And just, I don't know if you had an opportunity of reflecting on the language. What does it mean to say there's a probability that something may happen?
You asked me to interpret that.
Yeah, I mean, does it make sense to you?
Yes, I mean, it's a language that is used all the time. The probability of something happening.
May.
Yes.
Language is certainly used, the probability of something happening. But the probability of something maybe happening is difficult to understand, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Because
This language, it is used. I mean, I've seen it.
because the may might just as well go the other way.
Yes.
So did you understand this advice?
I understood it at the time, but if you read it now and you want to interpret the language, well, you can. Sitting here with all the documents we have, at the time, the 2 pages that Mr. Mkonas asked from me and Mr. Kunde was delivered to him, and this is what you were referring me to earlier. This opinion that we have here on the 20, that's dated 22 Feb, is also an opinion that rightfully, when you look at it now, doesn't seem to make sense. Because paragraph 1.1 says that thing, and the last paragraph says something else.
Did you read that sentence, which has got probability? Did you read it as meaning that the probabilities were that the bargaining council would find the sanction of dismissal inappropriate? Did you understand it to be to that effect?
Yes, sir.
That's how you understood it?
Yes.
And with that understanding, you then found it in conflict with 1.1?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Because you see, 1.1
Yes.
is what the attorneys are saying.
Yeah.
It's their opinion.
Yes.
But they're also telling us that even if we say this,
Yes.
probably the bargaining council can see it differently.
Yes.
Well, that's what it says.
Oh, okay. No, you may be introducing a nuance that maybe one might not pick up. Are you saying the attorneys in the 2 paragraphs are saying, or are saying effectively saying, on the one hand, our opinion is that there are no good prospects for Mr. Gama to succeed in the bargaining council, the arbitration, in having the dismissal declared unfair and getting reinstatement. That's the opinion they give. But having said that, are you saying in the later paragraph that has got probability, they are saying, irrespective of our opinion, we think probably the bargaining council will find the dismissal unfair and reinstate Mr. Gama. Is that how you read it?
That's how I read it. You see, an opinion can be given to say, what are your views on this? You give them the views. But you cannot be asked to guarantee then what is a particular body going to, how is it going to decide? Despite the views, strong as they may be at some stage. But now if you are asked, well, what is the bargaining council going to say? You cannot say that. You must allow for the fact that there might be somebody else who differs with your strong views, with your strong opinion. So I think that's what the attorneys were saying. They were simply telling Transnet that despite our view that the prospects are not good, there's a possibility that the council can still rule in his favor.
But if you...
This is my interpretation of it.
But if that's how you understood the two paragraphs, then there would be no contradiction.
Well, in the sense that council is asking the question, because the way he's asking it is juxtaposes the two to say if there is an opinion that the prospects are not good, then for them now to say to write the probabilities in this fashion seems to contradict each other. And I agree with him. You can read it like that. His reading is also a way of looking at this thing. But there is also another way of looking at it, where I say an opinion can be given very strongly to say this is my view on this, but be alive to the fact that another body can reach a different conclusion, despite what I say. So that's my understanding.
Yes, but you did say you saw the two as contradictory to each other.
Yes, I say that in the context of the question that is asking me now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Mybeck?
Yes, thank you. I mean, the one thing you can't do is interpret this opinion as saying that Transnet's prospects of success were poor.
Can you come again?
There's no way of interpreting this opinion as meaning that the advice was that Transnet's prospects of success were poor.
Paragraph 1.1 is clear that the opinion is that they are not good. The prospects are not good. Isn't that what it says?
It doesn't say they're not good, Mr. Mpoma.
It says they're not good.
It highlights what you'd put in your memo. There's a risk that comes with all litigation. Where does it say that your prospects of success are bad, you're going to lose this case?
No, it's not saying so.
Precisely.
It doesn't say so.
Oh.
Yeah.
So do you see any basis for settlement on the basis of that advice, which
No.
really doesn't mean anything?
No, I don't.
So let me take you to something that I must say has been troubling me about your evidence. You, at the beginning, when we were dealing with your first affidavit, you said that you first began work in relation to the Gama matter after the public protector's complaint. You worked together with Mr. Mkonazi in addressing the public protector's complaint. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my recollection, yes.
Did you have an occasion to go to meetings, board of directors or subcommittees of the board, where you would address them in relation to, no doubt, what was an important thing, that being the public protector's complaint?
Yes, I did.
Did you? Could I ask you, please, to go to bundle 1 and to turn up page 827.
Yes, I'm there.
Now, this is an annexure to the affidavit of Doris Schepe, who was a director at the time. At 827, you find a minute of a meeting of the Corporate Governance and Nomination Committee of 3 February 2011. Is that correct?
Yes, I see that.
And you will see at 1.2 that the members of that committee that were present, seems, were Mr. Mkonazi, Ms. Nyaka,
Nyaka.
beg your pardon, Ms. Schepe, and Mr. Sharma.
Yes.
And then if you drop down, so there are 4, the chairman and then 3 members. If you drop down under 1.4, you see that you were there as well,
Yes, I was there.
together with your boss, Ms. Stephen.
Yes.
Perhaps I could just take you, please, over the page to 828 and ask you to have a look at paragraph 6.7, the heading being report back from the advert process. And you'll see that the text there, what was happening, is this committee was applying its mind, wasn't it, to filling the position of the group chief executive.
Yes, I see that.
And if you then go to page 830, you will see towards the middle of the page, there's a heading at 6.9, investigation by the public protector.
Yes.
And there it records at 691, Mr. Mpoma took the committee through senior counsel's opinion that was obtained with regard to Mr. Gama's application for the GCE position. He highlighted that the legal opinion was based on the following three issues. Does the guilty verdict against Mr. Gama exclude him from being considered in the current GCE selection process? How does the pending appeal affect the board decision? Does the public protector complaint currently being dealt with have any bearing? When you talk about an appeal, I assume you're talking about the bargaining council arbitration.
Yeah, that would have been it.
Yes. So we will get in a moment to a clause in one of the Transnet's policies, clause 4.8.4.
Yeah,
You've heard of that clause.
I've heard.
And what does that clause provide?
I will have to look at the minute now because I don't recall it off my head.
Yes.
But I think it had to do with somebody who had been dismissed
Yes.
and who had not been, who was supposed not to be allowed to apply again for a
Yes.
position in the company.
Precisely.
It was to that effect.
And that's, in fact, why you had sought senior counsel's opinion, where one of the questions that senior counsel was asked is, does the guilty verdict against Mr. Gama exclude him from being considered, correct?
Yes.
All right. So let's then go to what was the central debate at this meeting. Let me ask you to go to page 831, and let me direct your attention, please, to paragraph 6.3.13, where it says deviation from clause 4.8.4. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
And the first subparagraph says, Ms. Schepe and Ms. Nyaka stated that the current settlement negotiations with Mr. Gama were presumably a rationale for deviation from clause 4.8.4. So because there are current settlement negotiations, that was a rationale to deviate from that clause. That's what they said.
That's what they say, yeah.
Mr. Sharma disagreed and stated that it was not in the best interest of the organization to deviate from clause 484.
Yes.
Next subparagraph, Mr. Sharma stated that he was unhappy with how Mr. Gama's matter was being handled. He indicated that he was of the view that the committee was not considering the best interests of the company, but that of an individual.
Yeah.
I mean, what was being considered here is whether a dismissed chief executive, dismissed from a division of Transnet, could be in the running for the group chief executive position. Correct?
Yes.
The next subparagraph, the committee voted on whether or not it should deviate from clause 484. There were 3 votes against 1 in favor of deviation. So we'll see just now, Mr. Sharma voted against it. Mr. Mkunazi and the 2 other members voted in favor of a deviation.
Yes.
And then if you go to the next subparagraph below that, the committee resolved that it recommends that Gama be considered for the GCE selection process. Correct?
Yes, I see that.
Now, you accept that there was an extensive debate about deviating from clause 484,
Yes, there was a debate.
and you participated in that debate.
Yes, I was participating. I was asked at certain intervals to questions were asked from me, and I will answer them. So I participated.
Now, and I've brought this to your attention. Ms. Schepe, at page 833, she obtained the recording of this meeting, and she produced a transcript of it.
I saw that this morning.
And there's a certificate of veracity. You see that?
Yes, I saw that.
Now, what I want to...
But having seen that, I just want to bring something to your attention
Yes.
that you might not be aware of. There are instances where my name is written against what Mr. Mkonazi will be saying. For instance, he'll be saying, I want to bring Mr. Gama to my office, and that will be written against my name.
All right.
Obviously, I would not have said that.
We
So
can deal with that.
there will be some inaccuracies in respect of that.
Yes, no, that I understand. But I want to take you to a particular portion of this transcript, which I have brought to your attention before.
Yeah.
Let us go, please, to page 854. Now, I just want to contextualize this. This is really towards the end of the debate, because if you look at 855, and I'm going to go through it in detail, you see at the foot of 855, it says at 715, colleagues, I will deviate. I will do the same. I will not. We'll record it, 3 against 1. So you see there's the voting at the foot of 855.
Yes, I see that.
So this passage that I'm going to take you to, at the end of the debate, immediately before the vote. So let's start at 854. And I want to take you 2 lines above what is recorded on the left as 685. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
The chairman, now who's the chairman of this meeting?
You're asking if I was the chairman of the meeting?
Yes.
No,
Who was the chairman of the meeting?
it was Mr. Mkonazi.
Correct. So Mr. Mkonazi says, can you comment on that, the appeal process? Now we know that's the arbitration. Can you comment? And then it records opposite your name.
Yes.
Sia is not appealing against the dismissal for all intents. He's appealing the sanction. Doris, Schepe, but the sanction is the dismissal. Nyaka, he's not appealing against. We agree with that. Then over the page, opposite your name, he's not appealing against the finding of guilty. He's appealing against the dismissal. Now I said. You said that?
Yes, I said that.
And then Schepe said, which is the disqualification? Sorry, Sachs, I just want to understand which is the disqualification. So you refer to as Sachs.
Yes, I'm Sachs.
You said
They
that?
just misspelled my name a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
You said that.
It's the line at 690.
Schepe said that.
He's not appealing against the finding of guilty. He's appealing against the dismissal. Now I said, then I get cut off.
Correct. Could you then read, please, to the chairperson what you said after that?
Okay.
From 695 to 703.
Yes. Chair, the said paragraph reads as follows against my name. Right. Now I advise the chair to say that if we, as Transnet, go to the appeal and oppose the appeal, we stand a very good chance of winning that appeal. That was my view at the time. Where I'm saying we are not strong, Doris, is if we have to explain the rationality of why we're settling, I don't think we are on very strong grounds on that. That is my view. But on the disciplinary process itself, and if we go and argue the matter on the appeal, we stand a very good chance of succeeding. SIA can win, but we can also win as Transnet, but we have a very, very good case against him there. That is why we said, let us rather postpone to the 24th of April, Chair, after another hearing, so that we pursue the settlement process. So the dismissal, and then I get cut off again.
So let's just look at this now. Here you say that Transnet had a very, very good case.
Yes.
Right? And in fact what you say is that settlement would not be rational.
Yes, I say so. That's the effect of it.
So, sorry. Up until now, you've been telling the chairperson that you didn't have any view on this matter. Why? Here you are expressing the strongest view. We have a very, very good case. Where we're going to act irrationally is if we settle. how do you reconcile that with your evidence earlier that you had no view?
Well, my view would have informed at some stage.
Well, this is on the 3rd of February. Your view didn't disappear, did it, before the consultation
No.
or your memorandum?
This I got this morning. I recorded it, I read it, and I remember it.
Yes.
And I agree it correctly reflects what I said at the time.
So what's important is you got it this morning, before you gave evidence in the
Yeah.
commission. That's why I purposely, as a courtesy to you, brought this to your attention.
Well, it might have been the way the question was asked. But my view is as recorded there at the time, at the time of the meeting. But remember, this meeting happens not at the same time as when we were at Inanda. Because Mr. Mafika Mkona's request was when we were at Inanda to write him something that said that Mr. Gama had been treated unfairly. At that time,
Mr. Mpoma, you're really mixing yourself up now. When you said to the chairperson that you had no view on the merits, is when I was examining you in relation to your memorandum
yes,
that you wrote on the 14th of February.
yes,
This is at a meeting, very, very important meeting,
yes,
on the 3rd of February.
yes.
You're not suggesting to the chairperson that on the 3rd of February I had a very strong view and then my view evaporated by the 14th of February. You're not suggesting that.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
So, what is your position?
It might be in my recollection. Maybe I might have forgotten, I don't know.
But
Well,
it's
it's something that does need some explanation, particularly if you were given this in the morning and you were able to read it, and therefore you remembered that if you had forgotten, you remembered that you did express quite a strong view on the merits, on the prospects of success at this meeting. Now, when you were asked during the course of the day whether you had a view on the unfairness or otherwise of Mr. Gama's dismissal, one would have expected that two things would happen. One is that you would say, yes, I had a view because you had read it, you had refreshed your memory, and this was my view. Or you might say, well, I had a view from a certain time, but before that time I might not have had a view. That's another possibility. But to the extent that we were dealing with a time that is later than the 3rd, that was later than the 3rd of February, where you said you did not have a view, and you did not even say, look, I have actually seen something that there's a time when I expressed a view. So it's going to be important to check where the timing, if you had said that, that might have been something else, but you didn't say that. You said you had no view, and that was it. Yes.
We need to look at the context of these questions. I answered like that in the morning because we were coming from the consultation note meetings. We were coming from a request that Mr. Mkonas had made for us to have an opinion on whether Mr. Gama had been treated unfairly at the time, which wanted to go and table the board. And at the time that you asked me that, I still say I don't think I had a view. I didn't have a view on the matter. And then you continued, then you said, but you then received opinions later on, and so on and so on. But this was now after Mr. Mkonas, at the time we were in Nanda, had asked me this thing. At the time, I knew that he had informed me that the board had already taken a decision to reinstate Mr. Gama. All that was left was the details of the settlement. So my views were irrelevant, as it were, or views of anybody, because the decision has been taken already for Mr. Kabata to reinstate.
Yeah, no, but Mr. Mafoma, one of the points Mr. Mybeck made, which you agreed with, is once you had a view, and you had a strong view on the 3rd of February, that view was not going to evaporate after that.
No, I agree with that.
Yes. So mid-February, a week or 2 weeks later, or even 3 weeks later, when you were asked to formulate, prepare a 2-pager, which would include the issue of prospects of success or the issue of whether there was unfairness in the dismissal, you knew that you had a strong view, and the strong view was Transnet had a very good chance of winning in the arbitration. There was no unfairness as far as you were concerned in how Transnet had dealt with Mr. Ghana.
Yes.
So why did you say you did not have a view at that time? Because you did have a view, and a strong one at that.
Maybe my view was formed at different times. I really cannot be able to explain that.
You are not able to explain.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Mybeck.
Let me just pick up on a few things. If you go back to your words, we have a very, very good case. Then you say, that is why we said, let us rather postpone to the 24th of April, Chair, after another hearing so we can pursue settlement. So, I mean, do I understand this to mean that you understood that you didn't want to go to arbitration because you could lose? And that's why the arbitration was postponed so you could settle, correct?
I don't know whether I will agree with you there.
Well, Mr. Mpuma, you don't postpone an arbitration because you have a very, very good case. You postpone it for some other reason.
The arbitration matter was dealt with by lawyers that I had absolutely no contact with. I'm sitting at a meeting where different kinds of questions are asked, and I'm asked for an opinion there. And for the life of me, if you ask me now to pinpoint a particular reason why X and Y was said, I might not be able to.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask you this once more.
Yeah.
What did you mean when you said, we have a very, very good case against him there. That is why we said, let us rather postpone.
I don't recall if what was being postponed when I look at this thing with this paragraph clearly. I mean, on it without context. I would have to know now whether was the hearing on the 24th of April. I'm not sure because I'm sitting here now.
Right. So what's happened now is, remember, this is right at the end of this debate. You've said we've got a very, very good case.
Yeah.
Look at what Doris Schepe then said. Sorry, Chair, I'm very confused. Then you have to explain to me, why are we settling if we're going to win the case?
Yes.
A good question, eh?
But
so it's a good question.
Settling, not me. It was the port that decided to do that.
But
so
it is,
you should have asked that question from them.
I'm asking you, it's a good question to ask, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Correct. She says, I'm confused. Then you have to explain to me, why are we settling if we're going to win the case? Then what does Mr. Makwenazi say?
You want me to read?
Yeah.
Colleagues, I will deviate from clause 4.8.
No. What does Mr. Makwenazi say at 9705 in response to her?
Oh, sorry. Then he says, we don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
How did you understand that? What did you understand that to mean? So it's put to...
The question is, I'm sorry, Mr. Mybeck. The question from Ms. Schepe is, if we have a very good case, why are we settling?
Yes.
And then the chairperson says, we don't know. Did you understand his answer? The chairperson's answer.
I don't think I would have understood it at the time, but that is what it's recorded there.
Yes. I'm sorry,
and Chair, at the time that this meeting was happening, the decision to settle Mr. Gama had been taken already, even if it was not by this committee. So by the time this committee is sitting and they have to make their own decisions on this, because after this committee, then this was supposed to go to the board. So the sequence of events, I am also not able to explain, because at this time, the decision is already there, the negotiations are happening.
See, what you are saying may be an explanation for maybe something else. But I don't think it fits into what we're talking about, because here, this reflects that this committee is entertaining
Yes.
the issue of how good are our chances of winning this case, in the arbitration.
Yeah.
So there is a discussion. That's why you say we have a very strong case, you know. So Mr. Schepe then asked the question, but why are we then settling?
Yeah.
And because she says she gets confused by the fact that you are saying Transnet has a very good case, but she knows that Transnet is seeking to settle, or some people within Transnet are saying, let's settle. So she's saying, why then are we settling? Then the chairperson says, we don't know.
When I'm in that meeting, Chair, I'm in that meeting with knowledge or information that the board has already taken this decision. Because this is initially what Mr. Mafika had told me. So, here are board members now asking these kinds of questions from the chairperson. So, for me as well, I don't understand why board members who are supposed to have been part of a decision already would be sitting in this meeting asking these kinds of questions. But then the answer is as recorded there, we don't know. And then it continues further down.
Of course, it goes to the question that Mr. Maybeck posed to you earlier on, namely where he was reading that you said Transnet has a very, very good case. That's why we postponed to pursue settlement. The two don't go together.
Yes.
You see. So now, Mr. Schepe says, why are we settling then? Mr. Mkhwana says, we don't know. But Mr. Mkhwana is the chairperson of the board.
Yes.
If anybody should know or should be able to explain what the board is doing, it should be the chairperson, the leader.
Yes.
But he says we don't know. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Mr. Maybeck.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. So the Chairperson says we don't know. Then Ms. Schepe, to her credit, says, but SAC says we stand a very good chance of winning. And then what does the Chairperson say?
You want me to read that?
Yes.
Chairperson, it's a 50-50.
So this is a Chairperson who starts out by saying, I've got no idea why we're settling. And a sentence later says, well, actually our prospects of success are 50-50. He doesn't agree with you, the lawyer. You say we have a very, very good case. Quite a shift, isn't it?
Yes.
And then you didn't quarrel with him. I mean, you didn't think it was a 50-50 case.
No, but
you thought it was a very
in those
good
meetings,
case.
You will not just jump in and
Okay.
you will have to answer when talk when called upon.
Well, let's see what Ms. Nyak has to say. I just wanted to, before we get to that, because it's an important passage, you, in your position as, what is it, General Manager Legal?
General Manager Group Legal.
General Group Legal.
Yes.
That's a high legal position, a
Yes,
high
I
up
agree.
legal position.
Yes.
Right. You reported to Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
It's just under the executives.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
There were a number of GMs reporting to various executives. Yes.
And you were involved in this because of your legal acumen. I mean, you had been brought in to deal with the public protector issue. You had got an opinion dealing with a deviation from clause 484. You had briefed senior counsel, correct?
Yeah.
And just so that we understand it, at this time you were legally qualified. We know that you left Transnet to go and do your pupillage, but this time presumably you were legally qualified.
Yes, I was.
I see.
But now, Mr. Mpoma, how could you, on the 3rd of February 2011, at this meeting, say Transnet had a very, very good case, a very, very good chance of winning the case, if you had never read the rulings of the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, the witness's microphone is off. Apparently.
Let's keep it on, Mr. Mpoma.
I didn't realize that it was off.
Are you saying that when you said at this meeting, Transnet had a very, very good case, one, you had not read the reasons or the rulings of the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry, but two, you may have read somebody's opinion on the matter, on the case?
I'm sure I must have read some opinion, Chair, because there was a lot of correspondence and writings on this Mr. Gama issue. I will have formed an opinion from somewhere.
But are you able to remember whether you had read an opinion, or you say you are not sure, maybe you had read an opinion, or maybe you had not read, but you had formed your opinion based on something else?
I must have read an opinion.
You must have read an opinion, yeah. But you can't remember whose opinion it may have been. Yeah. Could it have been an opinion from Dennis Reitz?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Or the one from Mr. Todd that was referred to earlier, I don't know.
Didn't you say earlier on you had not read any opinions when you were saying you had no view?
I had read opinions, even in my own memorandum.
Yes.
That I had written to Anoj. I had referred to an opinion there and quoted it. One of the opinions that I had come across, I actually quoted it there. So I know that there were opinions on this floating around, but I cannot pinpoint as to where exactly I would have read that to make my view to be what it was.
Well, part of what's concerning to me is that at some stage you said you had no opinion about the merits of Mr. Gama's case or the fairness or otherwise of his dismissal. And then we discover that at some stage you didn't just have an opinion, you had a very strong opinion. But you had not read the rulings of the chairperson of the disciplinary inquiry, and you may have read or did read some opinions that you can't remember who they were written by or so on. That's the sum total of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Mybeck.
Thank you. So we had got to the chairperson now saying that's a 50-50 case.
Yes.
Now let's have a look what Ms. Nyaka then says. I think, Chair, let's move it from legal now. So you had just, as the second most senior legal mind in the organization, said that we have a very, very good case. Ms. Nyaka says, let's move it from legal now, because that's the problem. I think let's move it from legal. He's given his opinion, which I, by the way, don't agree with necessarily. It's his opinion. I have an opinion. He shares an opinion. Everyone else has an opinion. Now the accountability and the decision-making comes from this committee, and let's decide at this committee that what we are deciding on this deviation.
Yes, that's what is right.
I mean, now that you read that, what is your sense of it? That you brought there?
I'm sorry, Mr. Maybeck. I think my not knowing what that clause 4.8 says is hampering my understanding.
Yes.
Are you able to remind me what it says?
Yes, that is the clause 4.8.4, and we'll get you the exact text. But in the context of the debate, it's a provision that says that if you're dismissed by Transnet, then you shouldn't be reappointed. So it's to prevent people being dismissed and then coming back into parastatals.
Yes.
And the issue here was whether or not there could be a deviation from that.
Oh, okay. But as far as you understand, there was nothing in the policies that made provision for a deviation, but there was a question simply at the meeting whether, even though there might be nothing, a deviation was possible.
So I don't think I can responsibly answer that question,
yes,
Mr.
okay.
Chairperson, without having got the text of the policy. I will give that to you, but what I can say is that I am aware of the fact that an opinion was obtained by senior counsel, the opinion that has been referred to, and you will confirm this, is that the opinion was that Transnet did have a measure of discretion.
Oh, okay.
So it seems that the advice was that it wasn't an absolute bar.
Yes.
And that's why they were entertaining the matter.
Okay, all right.
So, here you give this view. We've got a very, very strong case. And you see what the director says. Well, it's just a view. Let's leave it at that. I've got my view. My view is different.
Yes, I see that.
What is your sense of it now when you look at it in black and white?
I suppose the order to exercise that discretion, I don't know.
Do you have any idea when Ms. Mnyaka said that she doesn't agree with your opinion, have you any idea what information she had at her disposal?
No.
To inform that opinion?
No, I don't.
Do you know if she was a lawyer, was legally qualified?
No, I don't.
You don't know?
No.
Okay.
I knew Ms. Doris to have been an attorney,
Yes.
if I'm correct, but I didn't know
Yes.
about Ms. Nyaka.
Yes. Do you know what the chairperson's basis was for saying that Transnet's prospects were 50-50? Do you know why he said that, or is that something you don't know?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, all right.
Thank you. Then just to close off on this, straight after that the chairperson says, colleagues, I will deviate from clause 4.8. Nyaka says, I will do the same. Sharma says, I will not. Chairperson says, we'll record it. It's 3 against 1. Yes, we'll record it. So the 3 would have been the Schepe, Nyaka, and the chairperson, right?
Yes.
Ms. Schepe, on the face of it, seemed to change her mind quite fast.
Yes, I think so.
I'm sorry, Miss Schepe?
Well, she was the one that says, what are we settling for? What are we doing here? And then a few sentences later, she herself agreed to the deviation.
Okay.
Perhaps just to go back to, because it's captured perhaps better in the minutes, as to what the rationale was for agreeing to a deviation. Could I take you back, please, to page 831. Paragraph 6.3.13. Sub 1. Mr. Schepe and Ms. Nyaka stated that the current settlement negotiations with Mr. Gama were a rationale for the deviation from clause 4.8.4. In other words, look, he has been dismissed, right? But we are going to settle with him. And if we're going to do that, well, then we may as well deviate, right? Is that correct?
That's what it looks like they recorded.
And it was in that context that there was an interrogation of prospects of success, right?
Yes,
And Mr. Schepe said, but if we're going to win this case, then why are we settling this case?
yes.
Well, is it not remarkable that this committee was having this discussion in the first place? Mr. Gama remained dismissed from Transnet at the time of this meeting. Okay?
Yes, sir.
And he had been dismissed after having been found guilty of 3 very serious acts of misconduct. At least you know that part.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was known that he was not challenging the finding that he was guilty of these 3 serious acts of misconduct. He was only challenging whether, even if he was guilty of those serious acts of misconduct, dismissal should have been imposed as a sanction. Now, I don't understand why there is even an entertainment of the idea that somebody who has been dismissed there should be a debate about whether that person should be interviewed in circumstances where there is litigation pending. Because if at the close of if by the deadline for the submission of applications, he is still dismissed, I would have thought that you don't entertain him, you entertain the ones who have not been dismissed. If the closing date happens to be after the settlement had been made and he has been reinstated and he puts in an application, that's something else. But as at the time, he remains dismissed. Is there something I'm missing?
So I agree with you, but it's a question that will be better answered by others, not me.
Yes, but what I want to seek to establish whether that's something that may have perplexed you as well, as to why this was happening.
It's because you are sitting in a meeting like this one with board members who you have been informed were already party to a decision for the reinstatement. And you're still asked about deviations from policy and all this and all that. And you give the answer the best way you can at the time. So all these things were perplexing at the time, difficult to manage, not very easy.
Yes.
And you will, when you read that transcript, the one that Council was referring to, you will see a lot of discussions there, jumping from one issue to the other, and very, very difficult to follow even that very discussion. And how I respond to what is asked of me and the question. So
yeah,
it was not an easy thing to manage at the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Going to end off, Mr. Mpuma, perhaps I can just take you back to your third affidavit at page 29 of bundle 3. We had been dealing with the new documents.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr.
Page
Maibek.
29 of bundle 3.
Yes, no, I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you for something else. You know, yesterday and the day before and last week, I think, I was hearing, well, yesterday and sometime last week, I was hearing evidence relating to ESCOM. One of the things that seemed to emerge in regard to ESCOM and the suspension of certain executives at ESCOM was that within the board of ESCOM, there may have been certain members of the board who might have known of a certain agenda which would involve the suspension of those executives and maybe even a larger plan, but there may have been others who might not have known about that. If you look at Ms. Schepe's questions here of saying, but if we have a good case, why are we settling? It might be that here too, because Mr. Mpoma says the board had already decided that they would reinstate Mr. Gama. But here is a board member saying, why are we settling? Because we have a good case. So it may be that here too some members knew why they were settling the case, others didn't know.
Certainly.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, not at all, Mr. Chairperson.
You
So-
said the bundle,
We dealt with the documents at page 30
which
of bundle 3.
Bundle 3.
This is your third affidavit,
Okay.
page 30 of bundle 3. And there you see, you talk about the various annexures. But just to end off, could I ask you to go to paragraph 8, and could you read that into the record? You've already given evidence along these lines.
Yes. The paragraph reads, I mentioned in this regard that from the outset of my interactions with Mr. Mkhonazi, he made it clear to me that he had been instructed to reinstate Mr. Gama and that he wanted to find a way to do so cleanly. Although I did not consider my place to ask who had instructed him, I assumed that it must have been former President Zuma.
I just wanted to ask you, what did you understand the word cleanly to mean in the context of that discussion?
Well, Mr. Mkhonazi had a number of things that I think he was worried about, one of them being the various acting appointments in the company, because once Mr. Gama was reinstated to any position, so there had to be the shift of the various executives. And he wanted to deal also with the media fallout rather, that would inevitably follow, or some questions from the media that will follow. He also had to deal with the fact that there was a dismissal in place, which had not been reviewed. So when he said he wanted to do it cleanly, my understanding was that he wanted it to be taken through board approvals, all the relevant committees, so that it's a decision that the company takes. And I did advise him that whatever he was doing, discussions that he had with Mr. Gama, he should ensure that he takes it to the board approval, because the position that he was holding, he himself was a CEO and as acting CEO and as a chairperson of the board. So he had to make the point that he follows corporate governance and lead by example. I'm sure these are the discussions that we had, but he did use that word, that he wanted to do so cleanly. And we did discuss what I'm saying, because in the various discussions that we had.
Do you have any idea as to why Transnet capitulated completely, or Mr. Makwenazi capitulated completely in the settlement negotiation?
I don't know.
Actually,
I don't know, because that settlement agreement, in November already, I mean, 2011, long after it had been signed, we were still being asked for opinions on the clauses that related to the bonus payments and so on and so on, long after they had signed it. So I don't know why they were signed like that. I don't know.
I wanted, Mr. Maybeck, I wanted to remark that I don't think it's accurate to say Transnet capitulated completely, because it would have been a complete capitulation if they reinstated Mr. Gama, they gave him full back pay and all the benefits, but they went further than that. So I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
They paid his contribution of 75% on his legal costs and all of that. So it seems to me that
Well, perhaps
it's something much more than capitulation.
maybe reinstatement on steroids, Chairperson, or something. But, I mean, Mr. Mpuma, again, are you not playing coy here? Because you involved. Surely you must have thought to yourself, why are we giving this man everything? What's actually
What is
happening?
going on?
What is going on?
And of course, Mr. Mpuma, I don't think that the exclusion of the attorneys in that meeting that Mr. Mkhwanazi had with Mr. Gama would not have, at some stage, flashed back to you to say, what was
Actually,
going
those
on
concerns
here?
were there. I had those concerns.
You had those concerns?
Yes,
Yes.
I had those concerns.
So what did you think was motivating this?
It was the instruction that Mr. Gama was reinstated
Yes.
Yeah.
From who?
from the president.
Yeah.
Because that is what Mr. Mafika, explained it to me at the time. So the rationale, the reasoning was always something that I never understood.
I'm sorry, I don't hear.
I'm saying, Chair, the reasoning, the rationale of the clauses in the settlement agreement, I never understood them as to why they were there.
I just want you to confirm, because I'll need to make sure that the chairperson heard this. You testified that you were of the view that he was being treated so generously because the president had instructed that he be reinstated. Is
Yes.
that your evidence?
That is my evidence.
Now, in your statement in paragraph 8 in your affidavit, you say you assumed that it must have been former President Zuma.
Yes.
Now, was it an assumption that you made, or was there something on which let me put this question. Was it an assumption or was it not an assumption?
The reason I come to that conclusion, Chair, was at some stage, I did ask Mr. Mkhwanazi, in my interactions with him, because we got to be familiar with each other, and comfortable, I could ask him certain things, although I had to always have a difference to who he was in relation to me in the company. And he indicated.
What did you ask him?
I asked him, why is Transnet doing this? And he indicated initially that this was coming from the ministry, and later on he indicated that this was coming from higher up. And this is a word that he used, higher up, but the president was not mentioned. And I will not say he was mentioned, he was not. And this assumption comes from that. Because as a shareholder minister at the time, the minister had certain authority over Transnet. And they would interact, obviously, with Mr. Mkhwanazi at his level. So I was not privy to discussions that they had. But I know that, and hence in my memo, I could write what I wrote there, that mentioned the minister's name, because that memo was going to Mr. Mkwanazi, and he would have read that, and I know that he would have known that he had told me so. So I had no issue putting that paragraph in the manner that I did.
Okay, of course, there is that memo where you have a sentence that says that Mr. Mkwanazi, with the chairperson, with the support of the shareholder minister,
Yes,
in his rights, within his rights, or was within
Yes.
his rights to revisit
yeah,
the disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Gama.
Yes.
There is that memo where you wrote that,
yes.
which you gave to Mr. Mkwanazi at some stage,
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
and he never queried that sentence.
No, he
Yes.
never queried it.
Yes. But are you saying that at some stage you asked him why Transnet was doing this? When you say why Transnet was doing this, what did you mean?
I mean, the reinstatement of Mr. Gama on the terms that we were having.
Yeah.
And I can't pinpoint exactly when, but there were problems with the payments, the ones that we discussed earlier, and a lot of pressure on the company to pay the complaint to the minister at some stage. But I don't know exactly when I would have asked him, but he would. He did inform me, and the word he used was from higher up, and higher up, my assumption was that it's the presidency.
Did you say that he mentioned that the instruction was coming from the ministry at
Yeah.
some stage?
At some stage, yes.
And at some stage, he said the instruction was coming from higher up.
Yes.
And was that the same conversation or on a different
It would have
occasion?
been a different conversation.
Different occasion.
Because I was not interrogating him like,
Yes.
and then we'll have to remember now the
Yeah.
exact details of the conversation. But,
Yes.
as time goes on, and,
Yes.
and this thing is becoming an issue in the company in various ways.
Yes.
So, yes,
So when he said
asked him-
higher up, on that occasion, he had not mentioned the minister or the ministry.
he had mentioned that it's higher up from the ministry.
Or he said higher up,
Yes,
in other words, higher than the minister.
higher than the minister.
Oh, and
Yes.
then you understood that,
Yes,
or you took it or assumed that that must be
that's
a
my
reference
assumption.
to the president.
Yes, yes, sir. That was my assumption.
Mr. Maybeck?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mpoma, at bundle 3, page 30, the second thing you deal with in your last affidavit is the payment of legal fees. We've gone through all of this. I just want you to confirm, please, at paragraph 12.2 at page 31, you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down that you held a discussion with Mr. Mkwanazi, which culminated in him instructing me to pay 75% of Transnet's tax costs to Mr. Gama. You've
Yes.
given evidence about that. Would you confirm that?
Yes, I confirm that.
And you go on to explain that you escalated the matter to Mr. Singh and that he approved it.
Yes.
Chairperson, we have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. By virtue of your position, you would not have attended any meeting of the board except by invitation.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Were you ever invited to any meeting of the board where the reasons for settling the unfair dismissal dispute of Mr. Gama were discussed, or where the pros and cons of whether to settle or not to settle, or to reinstate him or not to reinstate, were discussed?
It's possible that I attended such a meeting, Chair,
Yes,
although I cannot recall specifically,
yes,
but it's possible
Yes.
that I did. And it will not have been only on this matter. I will be invited to attend EXCO, even if I wait outside, then call for a specific thing and then leave. So it's possible that I would have been invited to a board meeting for this kind of.
but do you have a recollection in your own mind of being part of such a meeting where such reasons were discussed?
Not at the moment,
You don't
No,
have
no, not off
a
my head.
recollection?
but it's possible that I might have attended
Yes.
such a meeting. I would not be surprised if some minutes surface someone to say I was there.
Yes.
It's very, very possible that I would have attended
Yes.
such a meeting.
Okay. Nothing arising?
No, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Mapoma, for coming to assist the Commission. We appreciate that you came. Thank you very much. You are now excused.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess we'll adjourn for the day, Mr. Mybeck,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
and then tomorrow we'll have Mr. Todd's
Mr. Todd.
evidence.
Yes,
Yes, on the same matter.
that's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. We adjourn.
Oh, what is got so much? Well, thank you, Mr.
I don't. Yeah, it's 9 years ago. It was a very difficult. This was double time for me.
Kumela ho